Hello there everybody, how's it going? I'm the Tmeister and welcome back to Timbukton in episode 57 of the series where we will be developing an area called Oscar Bay. Don't ask me where that name came from, it just popped into my mind and I thought it just sort of felt right with this whole area. I know like Halifax region has a lot of little coves and bays and a lot of places have these sort of names like something bay or something cove. So I don't know, I just thought it was fitting, and for whatever reason the word Oscar was like the first name that just popped into my mind. So that is what this area is going to be called. So there's not going to be a whole lot of interesting things going on in this particular region. However, I will say that it's kind of like everything. It's going to be mostly residential, first of all, but most of the residences around here are going to be propped up on this hilly, super jagged and rocky terrain, so it makes for some interesting landscapes and a little bit of a challenge too to get everything to fit here. But what I wanted to say too is like everything is going to be super like nestled into the environment. Like I was just saying, like with this being such a jagged and rough terrain, all the roads are going to be kind of squiggly, and yeah, it's going to be a pretty cool area. One thing that I took some inspiration from for this area, well, I'll give you guys a little backstory first. So the roads that you're seeing me build around, these have been plopped down for a really long time now. So at some point I just got a little bored and I figured I would just lay down some roads, get the whole, you know, theme of the city going on. And I never really took the time to terraform the area properly. So this entire area is just like super hilly. Now I took some inspiration from Newfoundland on this one. So more specifically St. John's, if you guys are familiar with that city. It's basically a decent sized city propped up on a hill or a series of hills. Like it's a super hilly and kind of weird terrain that the city's built up on, so it makes for some really interesting suburbs. A lot of the parts of the city are just sort of like, I don't know, the city feels like it's just randomly assorted. Like the roads are terrible to navigate, first of all, because you know they're just so squiggly and going all over the place. There's no structure to it. So this area is going to be a little similar to that. Of course, like this particular spot that I'm working on has a sort of grid pattern to a certain extent. But you'll see as we progress in the episode a little later on, we get into one particular area where it is quite squiggly and all over the place. Another thing that I tried to do with this area of the city is, as you can see, this highway runs right through it, and I was trying as much as possible to make the neighborhood look like it was divided in two by the highway. Just to bring a little bit more history and realism into the city, I sort of took that into account. You know, as I've explained before, and I'm sure you guys are no stranger to that, of course, the highway craze, like I like to call it, back in like the 50s and 60s, you know, it caused so much division of neighborhoods and so much destruction in cities. It wasn't as much of a problem in Canadian cities, I would say. A lot of Canadian cities had like anti-highway protests and things like that, more out west, but highways never really took on the same presence as they did in America. But I just wanted to make this area, I guess, a victim of the highway craze. And as you can see, it runs right through the middle of this little subdivision here. And I tried to make the street layout display that. So a little later in the episode, you'll see that I'm going to reorganize a couple of streets on the other side of the highway. But I just wanted to make it look obvious enough that this area fell victim to, you know, a big old highway running right through it. But yeah, in general, this neighborhood is quite old. Most of the houses that you're going to see are quite old. Lots of mature trees. Like if I was going to live in Timbukton, I would highly consider this area just because of its historic significance. and I don't know, I just like the overall look of it. It's actually like a really nice spot too. If you go down to ground level, because this area is so high up on a hill, you get a nice view of all the bays and coves down below. It's really close to the water, so it's nice, and relative easy access to downtown. So I made sure that there is at least, you know, some good connections to different parts of the cities. So of course, like this particular spot of the neighborhood is completely surrounded by highway from all corners. So I had to make, I had to like organize the streets in a way that traffic wasn't going to be a big problem around here. It probably will be, because there is an intersection where a train track goes across the road, and it's probably one of the busier train tracks around town. So I can assume that a lot of traffic issues are going to occur here, but I don't know. There's multiple ways in and out of this subdivision, so it might not be too bad. So for the most part, as you can see, this episode will be mostly residential. Most of the time I'll try to like skip over episodes where it's just plopping down houses. I try to find some more interesting things to show you guys, but I just figured it had been a while since I've released any sort of episode like this, so I figured, you know, might as well just make an episode out of plopping down some residential, because like I said, I really like this neighborhood. A little bit later on in the episode too, well, we're not only going to be placing down some low density residential, we're also going to get into some luxury apartments. Of course, with these, with this area being so close to the water and you know, being kind of highly sought after, I figured that some luxury condos would fit pretty good here. So we're going to get into that in just a minute. And also, I must say, the development of this subdivision here, it's going right towards my plan to expand the city. So this neighborhood is actually one of the last neighborhoods I need to develop before finishing the entire Timbukton Peninsula, which once that's complete, we can then move on to like the suburbs and all of the other areas a little bit farther out of town. In this build, I particularly like this area right here. All these little shotgun houses crammed right next to the highway here. It's the first time that I've placed down these type of houses in Timbukton, and I kind of regret not using them before, because especially in like a downtown area where your density is really high, these would look absolutely fantastic. So I don't know, it's kind of a shame that I haven't used them yet, but in this case, in this little area here, I think they look absolutely fantastic. And yeah, I had a lot of fun developing that little nook there. It was pretty cool. Lately, I've done a lot of tree shopping, as you may have noticed on the workshop. A lot of new trees have been popping up on the workshop these last couple of months, and I figured it's probably time that I update some of the trees that I laid down around town, because some of them are getting quite outdated, and it shows, especially when you zoom out of the city, and some trees tend to change color completely. So that's something that I'm looking at fixing up. So some of these trees, like Mr. Mason and some of other creators who make some really nice trees on the workshop, like I don't know, the realism that goes into these trees, or I guess what I should say is the amount of realism that you can get in your cities out of just simply placing down trees is really great. And that's a good tip that I can give you guys who don't have very powerful computers and you would like to create more realistic cities in City Skylines. What I would recommend are some low poly, nice looking trees on the workshop. Like at this point there are plenty, and just placing those down can really affect how your city looks as a whole, and it can really make your cities look much more realistic if that's what you're going for. But anyways, back to the game. What I'm doing now is preparing the second part of this area, I guess, or of this episode, which is right across the highway. The terrain here is much more challenging. I didn't terraform this part of town at all. So yeah, it makes for quite a challenge to build here. Make everything look nice and not too jagged. And here you can see the modifications that I did to the street layout. If you noticed, it's a little different than it was before. I made these streets just sort of go as far as I could next to the highway, and they just stop. And if you, well, you may notice during the cinematics later on, but if these streets were to continue before there being a highway there, they would connect to an opposing street on the other side of the highway. So I made sure that everything lined up perfectly, and it shows that, you know, this was once one connected neighborhood at one time. But not anymore, sadly. That's the case with a lot of cities around North America. And while I enjoy and I really like highways, and I like, well, I just like them as a whole, you know, I find highways fascinating. But it's kind of sad when you kind of think about all the history and the destruction of cities that they brought. They're really not that great. I made sure that this part of town had a pretty good mixture of all types of, I guess, wealth. So you'll have like these apartments here, for example, that are a little bit older, a little bit run down. They might be a lot cheaper than elsewhere in the city. And you can go right across the street and you'll have luxury houses looking over Oscar Bay. So I made sure that there's a wide range of different types of housing and wealth. I don't know, just to bring some more diversity into the area. Alright guys, so I am going to wrap it up right around now. I'm just going to finish placing down some last minute details, just sprucing up the area and making it look nice. So with that being said and done, I really hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please hit that like button, and also subscribe to the channel for many more videos just like this coming down the road. Also be sure to check out my Patreon page if you would like to support the channel. That really means a lot to me. And yeah, that is it for me for today, guys. Until the next episode, please take care.